The lecture hall tasted of recycled air and suppressed panic. Instructor Valresh stood like a living monument at the front, 7 feet of crystallized dignity, thoracic plates catching the light, his voice a low vibration that seemed to ring in the bones of everyone present. 200 cadets from 60 different species stared at the hollow with a silence so absolute it felt physical, the prelude to a verdict. What I'm about to show you, Valresh intoned, has ended civilizations. The hologram ignited, a writhing mass of organic machinery, drenched in an ugly purple light and moving with a predatory intelligence. It tore through a battle cruiser with the casual brutality of gnawed paper. Valresh's briefing was concise and bleak, plasma and fusion fed it, kinetic barriers only strengthened it, nuclear strikes scattered it only to let it reform angrier and hungrier. The word devourer pulsed across the display, and with it the room's hope eroded. A hot-headed cadet raised a hand, but Valresh's cold silver gaze halted him like a physical force. Evacuation and prayer, the instructor declared. Running was our best defensive option. That was the doctrine, the practiced, hopeless cadence the coalition relied on when faced with unnatural annihilation. Then came a laugh that didn't belong, human Marcus Webb at the back, grinning with that stubborn, baffling ease humans wore. In a room tuned to dread, his amusement was a deliberate dissonance. Valresh's voice could have frozen hydrogen. When Marcus asked if anyone had tried shooting it, the question sounded ridiculous in the sterile lecture, and yet the silence that followed was thick enough to carve. Marcus's casual follow-up landed harder. Valresh said barriers feed it, but did anyone actually try bullets, old-fashioned, chemically propelled projectiles, things abandoned millennia ago? The instructor's data pad blinked, his plates flickering. No, he admitted. Chemical propellants had been discarded 15,000 years ago as primitive relics. That admission changed the air. The cadets filed out, but none of us left with our minds at ease. Through the transparent hull wall we watched Valresh pull Marcus aside, show him something on a pad, and the human's grin melted into a hard, resolute focus. Marcus asked for the armory. He wasn't being dragged away as a criminal, he walked with a peer. That image, human and instructor side by side, was more unsettling than the hollow beast itself, an equalizing of audacity and authority that suggested old rules might be ignored in favor of an old human stubbornness. Rumors moved faster than orders. Within hours the Devourer had a name on the tactical grid and an approach vector, 18 light-years out, heading for the Tertian colonies. Evacuation protocols kicked in, the Fourth Fleet was dispatched in a sacrificial sweep to buy time. The message arriving at the command center read like a dirge. Admiral briefings flickered between strategy and bleak arithmetic as whole fleets collapsed like dominoes. Into that maelstrom walked Marcus Webb, not in cadet fatigues but wearing ballistic plates, reinforced fabric, and boots that looked foreign in our ultramodern hangars. He carried a rifle, pistols, and real metal knives, relics of a violent human history we'd mostly shelved. He sat alone in the mess, ate with clarity, and wore a certainty that read like madness to some and purpose to others. A cluster of us, Threxus the chittering bunkmate, Corin, and I, approached. Marcus's plan was brazenly simple, use low-tech physics against a creature that seemed immune to energy-based attacks. The Devourer adapted to energy signatures, it could not adapt to the physical trauma of mass and high-velocity shrapnel it did not recognize. In Marcus's calculus, bullets made invisible wounds, holes that could not heal in the same way. He spoke not out of bravado but because he had a moral equation: if doing nothing guaranteed millions dying, he'd rather try and fail than live with inaction. We trained in the armory, the smell of burnt powder filling our lungs for the first time in generations. Recoil taught us the body's violent costs, load-bearing taught us humility. Valresh, who had the authority to lock us down, instead walked the line between exasperation and awe. He gave grudging permission, not because he believed in the archaic tools, but because the data was data. If every sophisticated approach failed, why not test an overlooked variable? Within 90 minutes the strange quartet coalesced: Marcus, the reckless human; Threxus, companion and doubter; Corin, practical and wary; and me, the reluctant chronicler. We took an aging fast transport under the loose watch of the base and accelerated toward the maw of the Devourer. There was a singular rhythm to that departure, adrenaline, dirt-level tactics, and the quiet prayer that improvisation might outpace cosmic determinism. The battlefield was not a field but a void strewn with metal-like carcasses of a lost war. From the tactical display we watched conventional fleets launch everything at the Devourer, plasma, fusion lances, guided missiles, and watched the beast drink them. In 10 minutes, 17 ships and 4,000 souls were gone. The air tasted like ash and finality. Yet, within the wreckage and the smoke, we found a stubborn human logic: close the gap, make it matter in ways the Devourer did not expect. Marcus piloted with quiet competence. He ordered us through debris, using wreckage as cover, approaching like predators in a sky without up or down. We suited up, tethered to the transport, and drifted toward a tangle of metal the size of a small moon. Marcus's calls were low and precise: mark, fire, assess. Our first shots were almost ritual in their simplicity, kinetic rounds punching through the Devourer's hide and leaving real, physical holes. The creature convulsed, confused by an attack it did not metabolize the way it did energy. We escalated. Where bullets created openings, shrapnel widened them. A homemade fragmentation device sent jagged metal into unhealable wounds. The Devourer, built to eat energy, writhed as its structure failed to fold and recombine. It sent tendrils to investigate, we shredded them. When point defense lasers struck the already damaged tissue, they burned instead of feeding it, a new vulnerability: compromise then exploit. The fight turned into improvisation: use an asteroid for kinetic mass, trigger explosives to fragment its body, and play dead in the void when it came probing. Marcus's audacity paid off when an asteroid strike, pure mass, no signature, tore through the entity, breaking it enough that it fled. It did not die, but the beast that had shrugged off fleets limped and ran. We didn't win with noble sacrifice but with a stubborn old-school principle: when advanced tech failed, simple physics worked. The transport screamed as engines burned and seals cycled, Threxus cursed and pumped the engines as we pulled away. Debris littered the void like afterimages of a nightmare. The Devourer's retreat was not an endpoint but proof: it could be wounded. It could be challenged. In a war that had relied on the newest edge, a human stubbornness rewired the possible. The debrief felt oddly ceremonial, a room of starched uniforms and stunned faces trying to translate chaos into policy. Admirals, scientists, and Valresh stood before data that disrupted 20,000 years of doctrine. The Devourer had been wounded, not annihilated, but wounded in a way the Coalition's best minds had not predicted. The revelation was a mix of dread and possibility. The artifact of human improvisation had cracked an assumption. Marcus refused the easy laurels of heroism. He corrected terms: wounded, not beaten, a modesty that read as both honesty and a soldier's recognition of incomplete victory. Yet the consequence was immediate. Valresh authorized a new unit, Lieutenant Webb's Provisional Command, designed to exploit the newly discovered vulnerability. Marcus asked for Corin and Threxus by name. In one galloping administrative moment the reckless experiment became an institutional asset: Hangar 12, a human-led unit given resources, odd weapons lists, and a mandate that smelled faintly of desperation and hope. The Coalition's reaction was not unanimous. Some feared the precedent: relying on human unpredictability risked sloppy heroics and needless loss. Others, diplomats and practical minds who measured influence in incremental shifts, saw opportunity. If an empire could be persuaded that the unthinkable was thinkable, defensive policy would follow. The human tendency to try the impractical had collapsed one myth: nothing is unstoppable. In the mess hall, glasses were raised in a small, nervous toast. Threxus muttered that humanity frightened him, then laughed. Corin checked weapons lists as if cataloging the next experiment. Valresh's reprimand hung in the air: reckless, dangerous, violated regulations, but tempered. They also worked. That sentence carried both caution and grudging admiration. The story that would be told in centuries' lectures and holorooms would be less about brute force and more about mentality. An old tool, deprioritized by centuries of advancement, had found new purpose when wielded with courage and cunning. Humanity's refusal to accept unstoppable had altered a campaign. And as valve by valve of institutional disbelief opened, Lieutenant Webb's unit prepared for a new kind of war where improvisation and physics walked side by side with lasers and fusion. The galaxy had not met defeat, it had met an unexpected strategy, and for the first time in a long time, the scale seemed tiltable.